Hello everyone, this is Shannon Flummerfelt from Flipped Schools. This is the Understanding Improvement series. This particular video is for faculty. We're going to have a brief discussion of how faculty can examine instructional paradigms in order to drive improvement. Of course, in flipping a classroom or in flipping a school, there are lots of conversations that faculty will have about questioning, perhaps, some of the traditional thinking that's gone into instruction in the building. This particular video will help you to begin to understand how paradigms can drive practices and how we can use improvement processes to be able to unpack those paradigms and put them through some improvement in thinking. So first of all, what are paradigms? Merriam-Webster defines them as a philosophical or theoretical framework that allows you to generalize, create laws or applications. Paradigms are often represented by mental models, and the mental model is just a visual rendering of what the philosophy or the theory of action might be, and will provide also examples of how a paradigm is being generalized, made into a law or an application. So we're going to take a look at two different paradigms that impact instruction. One is an example of grading students on a bell curve. The second paradigm is that of student mastery. For these two examples, we're going to use simple mental models to visually represent what these paradigms look like. Here's the first example. This may look very familiar to you because most people in education use the bell curve or were taught and educated on a bell curve. But what the bell curve does is it creates a paradigm represented here by the way that scores are distributed. So typically we would have subgroups of students who have certain achievement scores, for instance, on standardized tests, or they may have different grades that are received on class activities or participation grades and so on in a classroom. Well, when the paradigm is used to place students on a bell curve, what that does is it formulates the following result, and that is that some students will definitely be in a subgroup that represents failure. There will also be another small outlying group of students that represents outstanding achievement. And then you'll have a few categories or subgroups of students that bunch up around the middle, which represent the majority of achievement. So this particular paradigm is basically one that places students into subgroups and thinks about students in terms of separating them based on performance levels. Therefore, we know we'll have some students who will excel, we know we'll have some students who will fail, and we know the majority of students will reach an average performance. In contrast, here's a very different paradigm example. This particular paradigm is based on the concepts of total quality management. And what we use in this particular example is the paradigm of student mastery. And what we're trying to do here with this paradigm is, regardless of the category of performance in a subgroup on a bell curve, what we're trying to do is to get each one of those subgroups to perform at a certain level of performance. So let's say, for instance, in this example, we would say that every subgroup category would perform at 85%. So what does this mean? This means that what we're going to have to do in the classroom if we use this paradigm, and we're going for student mastery across the board at a given set level of performance, this means that we're going to have to differentiate instruction. We're going to have to take a look at equitable distribution of resources to be able to get students to that performance level and so on. Because we know that, for instance, if this example were placed on top of the bell curve, that we would have Category 5 students who would easily hit this 85%. Some of Category 4 would probably be able to get there, and then we start to see things falling off for Category 3, 2, and 1. So as a classroom teacher, this means that for us, we would have to be able to understand where we would need to differentiate for students, where we would need to provide enrichment, where we would need to provide intervention, and so on. So you can see that paradigms are very powerful frameworks that represent philosophies and theories that we hold in our heads as classroom teachers. We carry those into the classroom, and then they are expressed in some way as some form of teaching practice. So here you've had two contrasting examples of how paradigms can very much affect what happens within the classroom. As you begin to work with flipping your classroom and participating in your flipped school work, you're going to probably come to points in the school year where you will begin to have conversations, or you'll need to have conversations about what are our paradigms about all different kinds of instructional practices. So this was just a short example for you, and maybe a good one to be able to start some conversations to understand when we use flipped classroom technology, what is possible. Do we want to stay on the bell curve, or do we want to stay on a student mastery paradigm? And to begin to talk about that and what that means. If you'd like more information about flipping your classroom or flipping your school, please go to the Flip Institute website, http://theflipinstitute.com/about/. Thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed the video.